Today's session is Leading Change. It's episode 7 now of the Leadership Lounge. So we've been doing this for a good couple of months now, which is great, and it's good to see that we're still getting people coming back and wanting to hear more, which is awesome. So today's session is all around leading change, and I'll just go back one. It's the second in the kind of June series of ones. So this is the second phase of ones that we did. So the first half we spent looking at kind of people management and looking after them while they're in remote teams. This series now is about driving them forward through performance. So June's are all around kind of performance enhancements and how you do that through your leadership and management. So this one's number 2. So last week we had a look at kind of the different personalities that you get in a team, and we shared some good tools actually afterwards. So I'd be interested to know if anyone's actually used those yet, but around personality profiling and how to kind of understand what their wants and needs are and how people operate. Today we're going to look at how you lead through change. So we're going to look at a couple of different parts of that, but primarily obviously how to actually be a manager through change as well, and how to keep your team aware of it, in line with it, performing with it as well. Next week, we've got Chris Hatfield doing a guest session for us on the importance of self-awareness. So he's going to do a full sort of training session on the importance of self-awareness and how you understand who you are and what your traits are as well, and how you utilize that in your business. And then we're going to start looking at kind of unlocking potential towards the end of the month. So that's more around how do you coach and how do you get performance out of your team. And then the final one for this month is leading with emotional intelligence, so EQ, not IQ. So really getting in touch with how to lead your team as well. So on that note, I want to introduce our panelists for today. So we're joined by Vishal and Lauren. You can see Vishal's cartoon picture there. Vishal has been with the business for a few months. He's going to give you an introduction in a moment. He's our service desk manager. And Lauren is our customer loyalty manager. And she's been here for a long, long time. And she's seen a lot of change and led her teams through a lot of change. So it's nice to kind of get both perspectives. One of someone who's been here for a while and doing it in payments events, and one for someone who's recently joined but has done it in other places as well. So on that note, I want to hand over to each of them to introduce themselves. So starting with you, Vishal, can you just introduce yourself, please? Introduce yourself, please. Oh, you're on mute. You're still on mute, Vishal.
Hi there, everyone. I'm the service desk manager here at Payment Sense. I've been here since November, so around about 8 months. I've previously worked in commodities, music, financial tech, back to financial tech, worked in Microsoft environments as well as Cisco environments, done a lot of change in a lot of industries, been working in IT for the last 13 years now, and been a manager for the last 5. That's about it. Yeah.
Thank you, Vish. Thanks. And handing over to Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I've been with Payment Sense 6.5 years now. I started in the kind of pro support team, and I was there for 18 months before I moved into a management position, and I've been managing people within Payment Sense for the last 5 years, mainly within the retentions team for about 4.5 years, and then I kind of moved in and switched up the team and did the change into customer loyalty, which obviously we'll go into in this session as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Lauren. Okay, so as we normally do, I'm just going to share my screen again. We're going to go into doing a bit of context setting at this point, just to introduce the concept and what it is we're talking about today. And then the main part of this session will obviously be our panel discussion and speaking to Vish and Lauren about their experiences. So just to start with, what we need to consider when we look at any kind of change is, what is it we're actually trying to achieve? And that's the first thing I really want to focus on for us. So starting with the end in mind, for all of you Stephen Covey fans, or for people who like to look at the 7 habits of highly effective people, habit number 2 that he kind of advocates for any kind of change, personal or professional, is to always start with the end in mind. And what we need to consider really is, what is it we're actually trying to do when we go through a change process? So however big or small it is, what we need to think about is, what is it that we're actually aiming to do here, whether it's for the team, whether it's for the company, whether it's for you as an individual. And there's kind of a series of simple questions that you should really kind of take yourself through when you're setting about to make some kind of change. So the ones that I kind of put down is, if you look at these 5, you will start to kind of scope out whether it's one that is worth the investment of your time, whether it's worth the investment of resource, and whether you're actually going to achieve what you want to achieve. So ask yourself, what do I expect to achieve at the end of the change process? What is it that I expect to come out of this with? What are my expectations of my team? And that's a crucial one as well. It's not just what do I want to get at the end, where do we want to be, but what do I expect of my team members as well, and how do I expect them to work? How do I expect them to operate? How do I expect them to adjust to this? And how do I expect them to come out the other end? What are the things that will help me identify that I've actually achieved it? So how will I know when we've actually achieved it as a team as well? So those first 3 questions are very much with that end in mind, and thinking about what it is we're actually trying to achieve. And then you can ask yourself, well, where are we now? What position are we in now? How close are we, or how far away are we from that change? And what's actually blocking us now as well? How do I actually get this started? What's stopping us from making this change today, or starting this change process today? And starting with that will help us kind of really evaluate whether it's the right thing to do first off. And that's what I want us to consider when you go through any kind of change. Sometimes it is put upon you and you just need to adapt and work out how to do it. And sometimes it's in your control, and you're the one that decides the changes as a people leader. And as always, we've got to consider both. You've got your project side of your work that you have to do, and the part that moves you forward. And then you've got your people management as well. And that's the bit we want to really focus on today is, yes, we can look at the frameworks for change, but how do we keep everyone on board with us and everyone on our team moving in the same direction? And it's particularly relevant with today's been our first day of some of our sales team going out and actually selling SuperPay, which is really monumental for us. And if we think about SuperPay as we go through this and the changes that we've already seen, but what's still to come as well, and as we move into Dojo, it's a really good framework for us to get started with. So there's a model, which is what this kind of session is derived from, called the Kotter's 8 Steps to Change. So a guy called John Kotter writes some really good stuff around organizational management and effectiveness, but in particular around change management. And more recently, what he's been writing about is the fact that actually we talk about this whole concept of change management and how to lead through people through change, but actually it's a given skill now. It's actually something people should have in their skill set, in their repertoire, that they're just used to being able to change, because we are always going to go through a change process. We're always going to have change, and businesses are always going to have to adapt, whether that's driven by economic factors, political factors, technological factors, whatever it is. We've got to be adept, I suppose, and willing to be able to change as well. And so he created this model around how to enforce major change, and he says there's 8 steps to it. So starting at the bottom, I'm going to take you through those frameworks, and then we're going to look at how you kind of keep people on track with you and your teams. So the first thing that you need to do with any kind of change is establish a sense of urgency. So you need to make people realize why they've got to change. You've got to create that urgency where people are on board and they're ready to start that journey of changing. So this could be things like market research. So something from your market research or competitor information might lead you to make a change. It could be the fact that a crisis has happened. So the pandemic, for example, is a big one. That's created this sense of urgency, which makes you realize everything needs to change. So if I think about it for my own team, the fact that the pandemic meant that everyone worked from home meant all of our face-to-face training stopped, and we couldn't do anything face-to-face, which is predominantly what we were doing. All of our inductions and everything were always face-to-face, and we had to quickly pivot to digital learning. So that created this sense of urgency for us to kind of up our change to move over to this digital platform and start using the academy more and producing more content and using webinars and things. So you need something that kind of creates that sense of urgency to actually start the change process. And like I said, a good one to use is market research as well. Like, that's great data. We love data here. That's a good one to kind of create this sense of urgency. Then from that, you create a guiding coalition. So you need to have people that are on this kind of, I suppose, change committee or on this change journey with you, who have the power and who have the importance to be able to drive that change as well. So it's no good just kind of looking at your team only. You've also got to look above you. In particular, stakeholder management and kind of executive buy-in is a big one here. So having people that they understand the urgency of this change and they're able to help you make that change. It could be cross-departmental as well. So you've got your team that are going to do it with you, but then also other people from different parts of the business that are going to have a vested interest in this, have the power and the importance to move you forward as well. Once you've got that, then you need to develop your vision. So what is it you're trying to achieve? And going back to that previous slide where we talked there about end in mind and thinking about what it is we want to come out with, you need to develop your vision for getting there. So you have your what with your vision, and then you need to have your how, so the strategy. How are you actually going to do it? And that's a real crucial part that you need to make sure is out there, that you've not only defined what it is you're going to do, but the steps that you're going to take in order to do that change as well. And then the next one is communicating that. So quite often we kind of come up with these ideas, we think about, oh, right, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, but we don't tell anyone about it, or we only tell certain people about it. Perhaps we tell the coalition about it, our change team, but we don't filter that through every aspect of the business. So communicate out that change, tell people what you're doing, look at how you're going to communicate, not just at the beginning, but the whole way through as well, and how much closer you're getting to that vision as well. Then you need to empower broad-based action. So what we mean by that is you've established why you're doing it, you've established the people who are going to do it, you've established what you're going to do and how you're going to get there, but you need to have the tools and the skills and the knowledge in order to be able to do that. So you empower that change by giving those systems or tools or changing those processes for your teams and allowing them to actually do it and actually action this change as well. And that's, again, another crucial one that you're looking at throughout this is, how are we going to do it? What systems are they going to use to do it? What processes are they going to have to follow in order for this to happen? And make that very clear, and then give them the opportunity to actually go ahead and implement that change. Then you go on to generating short-term wins. So often change is over a longer period of time. It can take months, even possibly years sometimes to do. And what you don't want to do is create this kind of vision, which is very long term, and it's about getting to the end of it and having no kind of sense of how we're getting there and how we're achieving it as we go on. So make sure you kind of scope out what the short-term wins are. So if we think about SuperPay again and going back to that, one of our short-term wins is, or one of the things that we've seen last week was the fact that we did a customer end-to-end, we onboarded them through the PAX terminal. So that's a short-term win. That's not SuperPay rolled out, that's not Dojo's here, that's a short-term win though, that's a milestone that we celebrate. And you need to have those short-term wins, and you need to show everyone and tell everyone about those as you go through it, so they feel that change. It's tangible for them. They're actually seeing that there's a change in the air, that things are happening and processes are changing and things. Then you need to consolidate your gains and produce more change. So step 7, he says, is now about this point where you've implemented a change, where however small scale it is, it might not be the full article, it might not be the full thing, but you've got to a point where you've made a change and it's worked, and you've had a short-term win, you've hit a milestone, and now what you can do is actually implement more change. So what we don't want to do is kind of have this big roadmap of change that we want to do, change something, and then wait 3 months before we change something else, and then 3 months before we change something else. I'm going to show you the change curve in a moment, but what you'll see there is when people go through change, they experience uncertainty that can create anxiety, it can create stress. And what you don't want to do is leave it where they're going on this emotional roller coaster for months at a time. If you know you've got a lot of changes to make them up front. Do the changes, the bulk of your changes, as quickly as possible. Still take them step by step, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but make them up front because they're in this cycle of change at this point. They're already used to change. It's better to kind of have it at once rather than kind of having something, letting them settle, and then they come back and feel kind of that uncertainty again and that kind of fluctuation of emotions. And then as you do that, you go into your final stage of change. And this is kind of really anchoring it in the culture now. And the way that you do that is you kind of have a look at, right, do all of our policies, do all of our procedures, does our management, does our leadership have the capability to support this as an ongoing change? Do we have reporting that supports this change in how we do it? Have we got, if we've kind of hacked a system and put in a short-term system change, have we now embedded this as part of the actual ongoing strategy so that we can scale it more as well? So actually anchoring it into the culture then at that point, and that's your final stage of your change. And Kotter actually argues, and he's worked with a lot of companies as a management consultant as well, and he goes through and says that if you follow these 8 steps and you put everything into it, you should be able to kind of really come out the other end with a changed culture and a big sort of organizational change. And that's major change. And the reason I want to kind of focus on that major change today is, again, in line with what's coming up for us with SuperPay and what we're going through at the moment, and the fact that we're going to this customer first mentality. This is all major change for a business. This is all major change for us, and we need to kind of help as people leaders navigate that change within our own departments and our own teams as well. And it's important that we kind of recognize these stages and what we need to do to contribute to it. But equally, like I said, we have a team to manage, and that's the point of this series, is how do we actually help our team members to do this, and what are the good things that we can be doing to support people through this. So the do's for good change leadership here. So first thing that I've put on there is share what you know. There's nothing worse than people kind of being in the unknown phase of not knowing what's going on. They heard that we're doing change and they've heard nothing since. Give them details, give them deadlines, give them objectives, take them on that journey with you. Like I said, celebrate the short-term wins, just give them information. And it's okay if you don't know it to say, I don't know, we're not sure, we haven't worked that out. It's okay. People prefer that honesty rather than being kept in the dark. But the only way you'll get successful change is to take them on that journey with you, and the only way you can do that is through communication. Make time for questions. Always ask them questions throughout it. Ask if there's anything that you can do to help them. Check in with them. How are you finding this? Is this what you thought it would be? Are you struggling with anything? Is there anything I can help you with? How can I equip you to go better with this project or with this change? So make the time to ask questions, and equally make the time to allow them to ask you questions as well. It's so vital that people feel comfortable when they're going through change to be able to question you as their line manager. And it's okay, like I said, as line managers to say, I don't know, I'll find out, I'll come back to you when I know more. Outline the plan. So like I said there, one of the stages there was the vision and strategy. You need to be able to say how you're going to do it, and down to the team level, that means what is everybody's role in the change. Make sure everyone's clear on what you expect from them, what their role is going through this change process, what you want them to be able to do, how you want them to be when they come out the other end of it as well. So they're aware of it and they're conscious. And people thrive on, we talked about it last week about millennials, but on development and opportunity and ambition. And it's really important that people feel that they've got a role to play in this, and that they're given purpose throughout these changes as well. Take one step at a time. Like I said, you want to do change all up front. So if you know you've got a lot of change to come, work out how you're going to do it, but do it one step at a time. Don't change everything on the first day. It's not going to work. People are going to be confused. There's going to be, like I said, anxiety. There's going to be real frustrations and utter chaos, really. So what you really want to establish is, okay, so these are the things that we need to change. What's the best order to do it in? Prioritize it. Make a plan for yourself as to, right, if we change this bit first, this is needed right now, this is needed today, let's change this piece can wait a bit longer, or this piece perhaps doesn't work unless this part has changed. And really have a go at playing around with that to see what's the journey we're going to take everyone on. Recognize good work. So we've talked about short-term wins. Short-term wins normally are associated to kind of, like I said, the major change, and that's normally driven by milestones with product development or milestones with customer satisfaction or whatever it is. But recognize the individuals in your team, give kudos to them throughout the process, thank them for their hard work, thank them for doing things. Don't just focus on what they need to do better. Quite often it's easy to kind of give us you've done this wrong, you've done that wrong, but actually take a moment to stand back and say, job well done, that was really great, you did a really good job there, or well done team, you've worked really well together this week on this aspect of the change, really happy with that. And then the final one I've put on there is invite feedback. It's crucial that we get feedback the whole way through from our team members as well. Not just to ask what we can do to help them, but actually how they think it's going and if we need to change anything. And I've put on there, do it before, during and after. Don't just wait till it's done and ask for their feedback. Feedback can be done throughout the cycle. So when you know what your vision and strategy is and you start to communicate that, ask for feedback at that stage. Does that make sense? Was that clear? Do you think we've missed anything in what we're going to do? Have we, with your job role, have we kind of made it clear what the expectation is? Ask for feedback before. During the change process, as you implement something new, right, in a week's time, I want to see how you've gone with that new system so we can get some feedback. Is there anything you'd like to see more of? Is there anything you'd like to see less of? And then afterwards as well, how do you think that whole process went? Did we handle that correctly? Did I manage that well? Did I manage your expectations well as well? So really taking that time to kind of invite that feedback from everyone is really good sort of measure for success. Then what we've got is the final bit that I want to cover is we've gone through kind of how to implement major change and then how to manage it as a team leader. What we need to be mindful of is now the individual. And we're going to talk about all three of these points shortly in the panel discussion. And some of you would have seen this on the Mind Couch episode last week. But what we need to recognise is people go through what we call a change curve. This is a model. It's Kubler-Ross, if you're interested in it, to have a look at more detail. But basically what she says is she did a big study on grief actually and how it impacts and how people go through change. But what she says here is we go through any kind of change, whether it's personal or professional, we go through this change curve and we go through it at different times, and that timeline can look longer or shorter for different people, for different situations, and that emotions could be a lot higher and lower in scale as well. But categorically what she's saying there is there's 4 key points that people go through with any change. The first one is the initial shock of the change that's coming. So people kind of not knowing what's going to happen, how's that going to impact them. They've just heard there's a change. You kind of go through this initial, oh, what does that mean for me? Then you go into a state of uncertainty. So you start to really go down low with your emotions because there's a lot of unanswered questions. How's my job going to look? What am I going to feel at the end of this? Can I survive this? Can I cope with this? Do I have enough money to get through this situation? Whatever it is, it's kind of this uncertainty and there's no answers to questions. And then you go through a turning point. So something changes. So you've either adapted to it, you've kind of seen it in practice what this change is, and you've realised actually this isn't so bad. I think I can cope with this. Perhaps your line managers or you as line managers are giving more questions to people, more answers to people, so they're able to kind of get a bit more clarity on what's going to happen and how we're going to navigate this. And then they go through this period of moving forward. So actually, I'm now getting back to my normal state. I've seen it in action. It's been a little while. I'm kind of happy with that and I can move forward because I know my place. I know what I'm supposed to do. And a good example I like to put to this in the workplace is a team member leaving. So you tell the team someone's leaving the team, and there's kind of this initial state of shock where people are kind of like, what? I didn't expect that, didn't know they were looking for a new job. So they go through that shock and then they're like, okay, well, they're still working out their notice, nothing's changed, so we don't see anything different. Then they leave the job and there's no one new to take over, so this period of uncertainty. Do I need to take on more responsibility? What does my job look like? Are they going to restructure the team as a result of this? What's the new team member going to be like? Are we going to like them? Are they going to fit into the team? Are they going to be able to pick up the slack? Then you go through the turning point where they actually come into the business and you start to see, okay, it's not so bad. Someone has come in. They're going to take that. Some of my questions are getting answered. And then they integrate into the team fully, where they're picking up the work. They're fully trained. They're getting to know people. And you see, actually, it's not so bad, and you move forward with it. So that's an example of how you navigate through that change curve. So hopefully that gives you a bit of context. But like I said, the 3 things we want to kind of focus on today is kind of navigating major change, that change curve. So how do we look at an individual level and how do you lead teams through that? And that's what our panelists are going to talk to us about today. So on that note, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I want to take the first question over to Lauren. So Lauren, the first thing I want to ask you is can you sort of describe to us the biggest change that you've led a team through, and what were the defining moments that you remember of that change?
Yeah, so one of the biggest changes I think I've led my team through is obviously essentially repurposing the retentions team to the customer loyalty team. And this involved essentially changing their entire workload, all the tasks they normally do. Not only were they changing what they were doing and what their job role essentially would be, they were also then helping to assist moving their current workload to a different team who's located in a different office up in Hull as well. So it was a lot of change going on at the same time. It's moving the workload from one team to another team whilst also taking on new responsibilities, new tasks, and learning new things at the same time. And I think some of the defining moments for me were how quickly the team were picking up the new systems, how quickly they were giving feedback when they were given the opportunity to on the new systems. For example, I'd already seen Gainsight, which is one of the new systems they were going to use, and they were picking up quicker than I was. And also, I think another defining moment for me was in terms of transitioning the team over to Hull, how helpful they were, and even once that kind of changeover had finished and it was officially retention is now in Hull, customer loyalty is now a fully fledged team in London, but how willing the team was still to assist the whole team and continue to support them, even though they've now essentially got a whole new job role and new tasks that they need to be getting on with as well.
Which is great. I'm sure that's stuff that you didn't really expect to come out of it potentially from the beginning. And I like what you said there around that feedback bit as well, like the fact that they were giving you feedback throughout as well every time you opened it up for them, and they were able to help you with the system as well. And I suppose that goes back to showing how vital it is, right, for you to take them on that journey with you and keep them in the loop as well. Did you kind of plan for them to help the whole guys, or did they just naturally take that on anyway?
So there was always going to be the plan that they were going to need to assist the whole team anyway. But before I obviously announced the change and what was going to happen, but before I could even kind of get into how it would transition, there was already people volunteering to help with the transition, that the fact they'd be more than willing to travel if needed to assist the people in Hull as well. So there was obviously a bit of, I'm going to need help with this, but there's a lot of people volunteering themselves as well, which is really good.
That's amazing. That's really good. Okay, cool. So same question to you, Vishal. What was the biggest change process for you that you've ever led a team through? And again, what were the kind of the key defining moments of that change that you remember from that experience as well?
Well, we had I worked at a company that had, say, 2-3 people in a team. I come in, they've decided that they would actually like to take the outsourced company that's dealing with some parts of their IT equipment or IT business back in-house, and then create a brand new system where the team would become from 3 down to 17. So I was bringing on the 14 people from the outsourced company. Now, there's going to be moments where you're going to have people that have certain situations. They're going to have certain abilities. Certain people are going to have certain personalities. Trying to find a way to develop the team that's been outsourced for such a long time and been one separate group of entity, and then bring it into another company and get them to all collaborate together, look at each other as equals. So, it was a tough situation to be in. It took around about 4 to 6 months. But what I realized was that trying to have individual meetings with every single person individually, knowing their strengths and weaknesses, and then working out who to pair each other with. So I worked out who's going to be doing well in certain situations and who's not so great at it. Get them to collaborate together and work in pairs. And then the team managed to work really, really well together. They managed to realize where they were able to help each other, where they were able to get better experiences, what they might not understand. And it really, really helped with the situation and made the whole team have a better bond. So within the 4 to 6 months of when they all moved in-house, we were a winning team. We had awards handed over at Christmas parties, and we had outstanding performance from all of the team members. We had no issues at all, because every single person knew what their defining role was from the start all the way to the end.
Which is great, isn't it? I mean, that goes back to that whole piece around planning and kind of knowing what you're trying to achieve, and then how your team going to help you get there. And I think that's really crucial. So was there anything else that you did to assist them, aside from kind of just planning? Was there anything else that you did to assist them through that change?
Yeah, so feedback was everything. Like, I didn't want to be the guy who is going to be a dictator and then say, this is how everything should play out. We were very collaborative. We did mood boards, we did whiteboards, we did functions on like every single stage of what we were going to do. It's very, very, very good to always make sure you have your team on the same page as you at every given moment. So there'd be, bi-weekly meetings that everyone would jump on. So everyone knew exactly where they stood, what was happening, what was delayed, and feedback from other departments. So it's always nice to know where other departments see the progress happening, and if they feel like there's been any change within the 6 months of the project itself.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. That makes sense. Okay, so Lauren, I just want to go back to you now on your piece there, where you were saying about kind of the biggest change for you was moving the retention team to Hull and repurposing repurposing your team to be customer loyalty. And you talked there about like some of the things that were kind of the good behaviors that you saw and the things that you implemented. But obviously you had a change of roles and responsibilities that you had to implement as well for your team and for all the members of the team. So how did you go about kind of planning what their new role would look like and how you would transition them into that new skill set, I suppose, and that new way of working?
Yeah, so I think I was obviously given a kind of list of all the things that customer loyalty team is now going to be. I kind of had a bit of a free range to decide what kind of task we get to kind of do within the team. But I think the important thing was speaking to the team, laying out kind of, this is my idea, this is the way I think I should do it, and how I think it should be implemented. However, what do you guys think? Do you think this is everything a customer loyalty team should be doing? And obviously they already had a lot of valuable feedback from being retention agents themselves. They knew kind of what things would already improve the customer's journey. So welcome calls was something that we implemented by bringing into the customer loyalty team. There's also a range of feedback from the team as to what items should be on the welcome call and how to structure the call and things like that. And again, it was other things we brought in, such as the health score. And as soon as we started doing the health score, it's getting feedback of this kind of overlaps with the renewals team, because when a customer has a bad health score, it's normally because they have propensity to churn, which means their lease is running out. However, there's another team in a different office already trying to contact a customer in regards to trying to renew their lease. So it's like there's crossover. I think we need to smooth out this process, maybe bring renewals as part of the customer loyalty team, or change how the health score call is run and things like that.
That makes absolute sense. Yeah. And like you said, sort of getting their feedback as well, because I think that then instills this culture of trust and responsibility and ownership as well by engaging them in that process and being able to do that with them, which I think is great. And hopefully that worked for you as well, Lauren, and it worked for the team.
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of it as well is giving them a bit of an input in the time frame as and when and how you can implement these things as well. Because obviously you're always going to have to implement it at some point and you're going to have a deadline. But the small pieces you implement along the way to reach your deadline at the end, it's always great to have the team's feedback and they feel part of the change as opposed to it being thrust upon them.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, it goes back to what we were saying, take them on the journey with you, kind of make them part of the process. Okay, good. So Vishal, you've obviously worked in various management roles. So you've worked on sort of change throughout any of your roles, really. But how do you make sure that you have a team that can handle change? So what skill sets or what attitudes do you try and instill with your team at any given time, just to make sure they're always kind of prepared for change?
What I've generally gone and done in a lot of my roles as a manager is, first of all, I might just come in, and if I come into a company where the team is already defined, there's certain things that need to be done, don't need to be done, I'm not 100% sure what those are going to be. Now, I'd normally observe and talk to team members individually for the first 2-3 weeks. And as the team develops and we get more of a bond, I will have meetings with the team where we will throw everything onto a whiteboard of everything that's existing, everything that would like to happen, and we would shuffle those things around to see which of those items are most important, and try to figure out what it is that's causing the team the biggest stress. Because when you realize what's causing a team a lot of stress, you realize that could make or break your team. So knowing that you can fix those things, if there could be a situation where something is taking far longer to resolve than it should do, or it's coming in too often, are we able to automate the process? Are we able to create a process where it doesn't need 19 hops before it's finished and completed? It doesn't need 9 approvals. Can it be done with 1? Using life experiences, tech experiences, talking to the team about what it is that makes the process so long. Is there a way that we can define this a bit better? And getting a collaborative view on what it is that's helpful in the situation will definitely get you and your team on the same page, get you understanding where their difficulties are, where their problems are. And as much as you're trying to make those changes, the team is telling you where they're having the issues themselves. And when you're able to overcome those small hurdles at the start, you're more likely to build such a great bond and such a great trust with the team, because they understand that as much as you would like to make those changes, you're not just coming in and saying, okay, we're going to start again from scratch. I don't like anything you're doing. Doing that will cause a lot of negative behavior. Team members won't accept you as quickly as they should. And you will lose confidence really quickly.
Yeah, so you need the buy-in, you need to kind of have that credibility as well, and kind of follow up on what you say. And I really like your point there as well about kind of establishing with them what works and what doesn't by laying out this kind of journey, because you're right, as managers sometimes we can be a bit too far removed from it as well to actually understand what are their struggles that they have on a day-to-day basis, whether it's system or process or whatever.
Yeah, and you have no, like when you first come into a team and you're actually talking to them, you have no loyalties to anybody. You're not friends with this person more than you're friends with that person. You can kind of just walk in and go, okay, tell me how it is. We are being very, very frank with each other. And I've always done that from being a manager from the start, is be as frank as I can, but also not to the point where they feel like they're being undermined or they're being embarrassed. Have those close contacts where you talk to them about situations, make them understand that there are ways to do things, and maybe things that have been done might not have worked, but at least they understand that what they're doing is correct in some way, but we can make it better and we can do this better. And then when they realize that you're giving them a little bit of wording on how to do things, they'll do it themselves. And when they get to that stage, they'll come back to you and say, oh, by the way, I've just achieved this. This is great. And it's happened already since November that I've been in this team. I've pushed Martin and others to get accreditations and, things that they were looking to achieve in, I don't know, a year's time, 2 years time. But I want to make sure that they're following little steps to get there outside of the little bubble that they're in within IT. So they have some defining purpose within the department. As much as they're making change within their own lives themselves.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Their personal development as well. Okay, so sticking with you, Vishal, and on that note then, so you've talked there about them achieving milestones, and one of the big things that you need to be sure of with any sort of change program is expectation setting and managing expectations as well. So how do you communicate out your expectations, and how do you check in on it? And I suppose as well, to add to that, how do you deal with people who aren't meeting expectations when you go through a change process?
So what I tend to do is we'll always have a formal setting where we'll talk to the team about what the bigger picture is, first of all, but we'll break those down into 4 to 8 steps and break those down into like a month review. So within the first couple of weeks, we want to be able to achieve this, want to be able to achieve this. And what we'll do is, as we've broken those steps down, we'll try and get the team to define each role to each person. So each person will have their own little piece of the pie. And by the time that we've managed to get every single person collaborating together by the end of the month, we've managed to achieve the bigger picture. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that within those huddles, we tend to have I tend to have a lot of huddles with my team. So once a day, first thing in the morning, we'll have a little catch up, see how everyone's getting along, because there are going to be certain times where people will not speak out till the very end and go, okay, I'm really stuck and I didn't manage to get it done. But if we're able to have a consensus of everyone gets together first thing in the morning, talks about things that they're up to, and if they're having any issues, then we can all get together and try and help each other out where possible, so that that other person is able to meet the milestone that they've been set by myself or by the team.
Okay, and in terms of sort of if they don't meet the expectations, what's your approach there?
I am keeping a close eye on most of the team, so I do tend to try and see what they're up to. We do have certain targets that we set them. If they're not able to meet their requirements or they're not able to meet the goals that we've set, I normally tend to get another team member to sit with them and see if there's something that they're not able to do. Maybe they're afraid to talk to me. Maybe they're afraid that they're gonna fail, and they might not have that confidence. And knowing that you're a manager, it sometimes segregates you because of the title. It puts them in a position where they're not 100% sure whether they can or cannot come to you and let you know, to be honest, that I've not managed to make this this progress that I was supposed to make. So having another team member go over and speak to them and sit with them and see if they're able to help gives them a feeling of them being able to at least try and see if they can resolve the issue. If that doesn't work, then I will always sit down with them on a one-to-one basis. Speak to them, maybe go for a walk, take them on a one-to-one. So it's not in a formal setting, and just talk to them about their project, talk to them about what they're up to, see how they're getting along, bounce some ideas off them, but not give them all the ideas, but bounce ideas off them. So that it initially came from them, but I invoked some type of thought process that made them achieve their goal.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you're right. You do have to kind of prod a little bit sometimes, don't you? And give them the opportunity to answer the questions. So yeah. I don't know if you do the same, but if someone's a bit quiet or they're perhaps not opening up, I will just make the effort to almost overcompensate for that and ask them, checking in on them a bit more regularly. How are you? What are you doing? How's it going? How are you finding this? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So Lauren, going back over to you. So starting to go on to the topic of when change goes wrong. It's not always a smooth journey through those 8 steps, and things can happen. And I'm sure you've had it where things have gone wrong as well, or things haven't gone to plan. So how do you, what point do you recognise that it's perhaps not the right decision for the team? It could be breaking the team, or they're not quite on board with that change. And how have you navigated that and changed that mindset for them and repurposed what you're doing if you needed to?
Yes, I think a lot of the time when it comes to things going wrong, the team recognise it before maybe management do, because they're the people on the front line, as it were, and they're a lot quicker to spot when a change isn't working, or there's clearly been a bit of a blind spot in the training or something like that. So they've started to implement things, the change is going through, and then all of a sudden realise, oh, I don't actually know how to do that process, or I don't know how to do that. So I think, again, this is where it's important to have that feedback throughout the process with the team, but also have the feedback in a way that it works for each different team member, because it's great having weekly team meetings. However, sometimes you'll find that in a team meeting, only one person seems to speak up for the rest of the team. And sometimes that person with the loudest voice speaking for the rest of the team is maybe actually only speaking for half the team, and not the other half of the team who seems to think that everything's fine, or actually there's something that they haven't brought up that they want to, but they don't feel quite confident enough in that setting. So I think having one-to-ones is really important when there's change going on, and maybe having them a bit more often, and making sure your team's aware that they can come and speak to you about things. And again, your team is more likely to spot if another member of the team is not maybe coping as well with the change as someone else, or they've got a blind spot. A team member is more likely to spot that than management, because if change is going on, management's often away in meetings, not always at their desk, whereas your team's always sat together and they can always spot it. So I think it's really important to make sure that your team know that even if they see someone else struggling with the change, that they can come to you in a way that it's not going to be like they're telling on their colleague, or their colleagues can get in trouble or something like that, but just so that management is aware that they can then have another meeting, or maybe pull up that one-to-one a bit earlier to check in with that person, and things like that. And when things do go wrong, I think you need to admit it with the team, and also not put blame onto the team either, because if you start blaming the team for the change going wrong, they're not going to get on board to help you fix it either. So I think it's important to take ownership of the change, of the failure of the change yourself, and ask the team, where do they think we can improve that? Because I don't think blaming the team for the change going wrong is ever going to work. I think as a management, you need to take responsibility for it, and then kind of hold that burden on yourself and try and protect your team a bit as well when something goes wrong.
You're so right with that. I mean, don't yeah, you're right, take ownership and don't blame the team for it. Just work out right what went wrong, and then again be honest with them and tell them, actually this didn't quite work because of X, Y and Z, and this is how we can do it better. And I like the idea that you said there around kind of utilizing the people in the team as well in their one-to-ones to ask how it's affecting the team. So you can say, oh, how do you think everyone's getting on with it? How do you think everyone's adapting to it? See what their views are of how people see it as well, not just their own personal views. I think that's really, really strong. Okay, cool. So with that as well, just sticking with you, Lauren, obviously you've talked a lot about the changes that you've been through with Payment Sense and the implementations you've changed, but what do you think, if you were to give any advice to anyone listening today about the actions people should avoid, what would you say would be the actions from your own experience of what people should avoid going through this change?
I really think you should avoid implementing change too quickly. I think it's really frustrating for teams when on a Monday they're told, by the way, by Friday or by next Monday, this needs to have changed instantly. So I think you need to avoid not giving enough time for a change to be implementing a change, and then thrusting the change upon your team as well. I think you really, really need a team's involvement, and you need to give them as much warning as they can. Because I find when I first announce a change to a team in a meeting, they'll all go a bit quiet because obviously that's the shock factor, like setting in, they're like, oh, I'm not sure what that means. And they haven't really got enough time for it to sink in and to think about their questions. So I think it's always worth having one team meeting to just announce the change, and then having a second one, even just a few days later, once it's sunk in for the team and they've actually got enough time to think of the questions that they want to ask regarding that change, in terms of what does it affect my job role? How will it affect me personally? Will I have to change when I go to lunch, my breaks, just things like that? Because that's normally the things people think of instantly. How's it going to affect my bonus? So I think you need to kind of let your team get over the shock, allow them to ask questions, and then go on to implement the change, rather than just announcing a change and trying to do it really quickly without any feedback. So definitely avoid essentially thrusting change upon people too quickly and then without having their input or feedback.
That makes sense. And do you find as well, Lauren, that when you're so the follow-up, absolutely, I agree with you there. I think if you leave it and you've announced this kind of shock horror change and don't ever address it again, you're going to lose people that way. But do you ever do you preempt what your questions are going to be from people when you announce the change, and do you ever try to address those straight off in that first meeting as well?
Yes, absolutely. So if there's something that requires, I don't know, for example, a system change, I know there's going to be questions regarding training. Can I have more training, or I don't really know how to use that system that well, and things like that. So there's always going to be kind of preemptive of, this is a change. I'm aware that people will probably need a bit of extra time to get used to the new system, may require extra training. It might mean changing around the rota for you guys a little bit to begin with, but also I'll get your input back from you. But yeah, there's a lot of ways you can preempt questions, but there's always going to be questions that you never think of, and you have to make sure you get their feedback again. But yeah, I always try and preempt as many questions as I can.
Yeah, I think when you get used to your team and the way that they work and the way that they think as well, you can preempt a lot of their questions, which also puts their mind at rest, doesn't it, up front? So taking that time not to just go out with the change, but actually think about the reactions you're going to get as well. Okay, so Fisher, going back over to you then, and coming into our kind of last question for the session now. For any leader that's new to management, or for anyone that's an old hand at people management, what would be your kind of top tips for leading change?
Top tips. First, always assess the way that your team is. First of all, like I said before, I've realized that coming in like a bull will always make you the bad person. Doesn't matter how lovely your personality is, you'll never be seen as a nice person. So assessing and being, like my father always said, it's always nice to be quiet and listen before even opening your mind to anything that needs to be changed or needs to be done, because when you listen, you get further. So I would say the first thing you need to do is have either a group meeting or a one-to-one with every individual team member. Find them out individually so they can speak on a one-to-one basis and say, look, I don't like this, or I don't like that, because they may not collaborate well in a group. They may not even open up. They may just sit in the corner and play with the pencil. They may not say nothing at all. So individually have your one-to-ones, listen to what they're saying, assess the business for what you think is what it is, depending on your experience, and then have a collaborative group meeting, and then have a meeting with your management. So your manager will know exactly what he knows about what the team's been progressing with. As you've come in, then you've given your views. Now, your change plan shouldn't be 3 months. It should at least be 9 to 12 months, because change takes time, and the team need to adapt to you as a person who's coming in to make these inevitable changes, but they need to understand the benefits. So as long as you're making progressively strong statements and saying, look, we're all a team, we've all got each other's back, let's try and figure out what we can do to make things better. I want you to have your own social life. I want you to have your own time away from work. I want you to understand your hours and not be like working really late, working really early, working on the weekends. So best advice is listen to the team as much as you can, and use those points to make the team stronger and more collaborative.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. And over to you, Lauren, for your final remarks then. What would you say would be your kind of top tips for leading any change?
I think it's ensuring that you understand the change yourself and what it will mean for you and your team, and the impact it's going to have on your team's day-to-day lives and job role. I think you also need to believe in the change you're making your team implement as well. I think you need to believe it wholeheartedly in order to get your team on board with it. And I think having team input and making people feel like they're part of the change and it's not being pushed upon them is really important. And the constant cycle of just planning and feedback. So you can plan to the end of the earth, but it won't matter if it's useless and your team don't believe in it. So I think you definitely need team feedback as well. So it's a constant cycle of planning and feedback.
Yeah, I think you're right with that. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And I like your point there around kind of believe in your change as well. If you don't believe on it, manage up your expectations from the people above you as well, and make sure you're clear to them why you don't believe in that and what you think it should be. Brilliant. Okay, thank you guys for that. That was brilliant. I just want to share one last bit with everyone on the call before we finish off today. And sorry, it's a bit of a shorter session today. But just a few resources if anyone's interested. There's a really great website called Mind Tools, and they do lots of different kind of toolkits for different things and different implementations in business. But one of the good ones they've got on there is around change management. So they talk about the Kotter's 8-step model, but a few other models as well. So there's a link on there. Please do go and have a look. I'll post the slides into the Slack group afterwards. There's a book if you want to read the book. It's called Leading Change by John Kotter. There's an audio book, and there's obviously the paperback version that you can order as well. And then LinkedIn Learning, as always, we've got thousands of courses on there, 16,000 in total. But if you put in change management, you'll see there's so many different courses on there. And one that I really recommend is Manage Change and Develop Your Adaptability Skills. So for you as a leader. But there's lots about how to take teams through change as well. So by all means, do go on there. You've all got accounts. Have a look at LinkedIn Learning and what's on there. Special thank you to Lauren and to Vishal for today. That was really, really insightful. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your top tips for that. Next week's session, guys, as I said, will be hosted by Chris Hatfield, and it'll be on the importance of self-awareness. So if you're free next Monday at 11:30, by all means join us. But on that note, I'll just say bye to Lauren and Vishal, and we'll leave it there. Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.